Appreciate all of you being here today. The topic today will be the U.S., state, and local chambers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In this August 25th edition of the New American, there is an excellent article in here called "Does the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Equal Crony Capitalism?" I would urge you to obtain a copy of this article and read it. It is absolutely very good. One of the things that I think we need to understand about the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is it's not really so much about a free market capitalism. It's more about crony capitalism, and I would suggest to you fascist or socialist capitalism. They're very big on right now trying to obtain certain extension of the Import-Export Bank. They're very big on expanding some of the quote-unquote free trade treaties that really aren't free trade at all. They're heavily regulated trade, and they're more about, I would say, political and economic integration than they are trade, creating something like the EU, which will cost liberties. I'm all about free trade, but I think you will find that what they're proposing here is not truly free trade. Another thing that they are very big on is amnesty for our illegal aliens in this country. So those are more the agendas of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I think you'll find a relationship with the state chambers and all of the states, and that's why, regardless of where you are, much of the agenda of your chambers are going to have some similarities to them, in my opinion. The good part in the state of Oklahoma, one of the reasons that we've been able to go from a deep dark blue state to a bright red state, primarily in 20 years, is with the help of the financing of your chamber, the state chamber, and the grassroots that have worked together so well. But once this takeover by the Republican Party has occurred in Oklahoma, we now find ourselves sometimes as the grassroots, principled conservatives, constitutionalists, butting heads with some of the agenda of the chamber. So now the Republican Party, the members of that, those elected officials that are Republican, they now have to make a choice. Are they going to go with where the source of the money? Or are they going to go with the grassroots? And they tend to want to go with the money. One of the things that I believe has occurred, or is in the process of occurring, is an agenda of all the chambers, particularly led by the U.S. Chamber, to bring the Republican Party back to the day of what I would say the Rockefeller Republican Party, the Blue Bloods, where it represents the interest of business and business only, and to the exclusion of virtually everything else. I don't think that is a good policy. I'm, again, very much a free market advocate, but there is a big difference between free market capitalism and socialist, in fact, fascist capitalism. Understanding that if you ever have an opportunity to see online or obtain a video called Overview of America, published by the John Birch Society, it's vital to understand those differences in economic systems. In Oklahoma, the state chamber has done some very good things. They've helped in obtaining needed tort reform, needed workers' compensation reform. They've pushed for right to work that we obtained in 2001. They've also helped for reforms of our retirement systems in Oklahoma that were in very serious trouble. And with some reforms, we've been able to improve the fiscal condition of those retirement reforms. There's been some other things that they've helped in also. However, in about 2010, for the first time ever in the history of the state of Oklahoma, rather than hiring an executive director of the chamber from the business community, they chose to pick someone that was a former politician. And that ushered in a new philosophy for the chamber, one that's aggressive, in my estimation, with the agenda of controlling or exerting total control over the state of Oklahoma and over the legislature of Oklahoma for the agenda of the chamber. One of the things that has occurred is they, in 2012, shortly after the session, the director of the chamber and the head lobbyist for the chamber went to the Tulsa Broken Arrow area to give an update on the legislative session. We had some folks from OK Safe, Oklahomans for Sovereignty and Free Enterprise, attend that meeting and tape that meeting, and it became very important for us to understand and get a glimpse. I'm not going to read the exact quotes for the sake of time, but I will try to give you the gist of those quotes there. One of the things that they indicated was they were a little bit tired of working to elect people, and then once they're in office, they maybe don't vote according to the agenda of the state chamber. So they've come to believe that it's better to find people that, shall we say, already have a similar agenda and put those people in office. Well, part of the way to do that is to get involved in campaigns. The lobbyist actually said something, a quote similar to this. He said, "This ain't your granddaddy's chamber." He says, "We're running business, chamber business out of one side of the shop, and we're running campaigns out of the other side of the shop." So with an association with some of the top political consulting firms in the state of Oklahoma, they are working to find candidates that will, once elected, walk lockstep with the agenda of the state chamber. And because they have so much money, they're able to put a great deal of money in the campaigns, and there is now a real struggle within the Republican Party between the state chamber candidates and the grassroots candidates. We're winning some and we're losing some in that struggle, and the balance is to be determined at another time. One of the things that they have done is another thing is they've been concerned about laws being passed that would be favorable to their agenda, and then the courts have struck some of those laws down as being unconstitutional. So they have also started up an effort to rate the judges in the state of Oklahoma. And those judges are rated purely on a business-friendly situation. We have a state representative by the name of John Bennett that kind of blew the lid on that. They were trying to quietly do that, and he was able to obtain the names of the people that are members of the state chamber that would be the oversight for this effort. And in so doing that, found out that many of them represent businesses that will have to appear before the courts, suggesting it could be a very significant conflict of interest. Another thing they did is several years ago, and didn't realize it at the time, they started the Prosperity Project. It was called the Oklahoma Prosperity Project. And the thought is that many employees and companies don't necessarily know who to vote for. And so they're going to try to gain that information from someone. So why not from your boss? So the idea was for the boss to be able to communicate down to their employees the recommended person to vote for. One of the things that they have created to use for that is this item right here called the Reid Report. Now this basically scores all of the lawmakers, scores them for this year and for last year. The problem is the Reid Report is, in my opinion, arbitrary and capricious. One of the things that my particular state lawmaker has scored fairly low on this most of the time, yet on the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper's conservative index, he is measurably the most conservative lawmaker in the state of Oklahoma, the most constitutional conservative one, and he doesn't do so well here. So he gets a score one year of about a 55, and he contacts the folks at the Reid Report and asks them, well, how did I get this grade? And because they never publish the votes that are used for the general public to see where they are. And so they began to explain to him what that process is. Well, it turns out he voted the same way the Speaker of the House did on a particular bill. The Speaker was credited points for it. He had points deducted. when he brought that up, they said, well, there's other considerations that we take into consideration here. And so one year he scored, out of 83 votes, he was correct on 78 of them, and I think he scored a 60. So again, contact him, said, well, we weight certain votes a certain way and things like that. The reason I believe it's arbitrary and capricious is if they don't like you, you're not going to get a good score there. And if they like you, if you give them 2 or 3 of their issues, they will score you high. We have kind of a boondoggle in Oklahoma called the Native American Heritage Center. It was originally going to be about a $110 million museum honoring, Smithsonian-level museum honoring the American Indian. Now this was started just about 3 years after we built a new history center 3 miles away that gives significant recognition to Indians as far as the history of Oklahoma, as it should. Well, the state of Oklahoma has only borrowed $67 million so far to get it to a place where it's now at $90 million investment, and they need another $80 million to finish this thing out. They have been pressuring the state legislature for about 4 years now to come up with $40 million more borrowed dollars, which will be matched by $40 million that they've arranged in the private sector to finish this out. Of course, conservatives say in Oklahoma, we've already spent $67 million more than we should have on this project, borrowing all of that. We don't want to borrow another $40 million. So 2 years ago, just the last week of the legislature, when the press was on, a state senator handed me a letter from the Oklahoma City Chamber, the real beneficiaries of this thing. And this letter was informing all lawmakers that 15 points of the Reed score would be based upon their vote for this or vote against it. My state senator voted against it and yet got 100 on the Reed report. So sometimes they don't even match up to their threats. So based on an understanding of one way to control is telling people how to vote. Another way to control is this scorecard for judges. So they are working very aggressively to do these things. It's not particularly uncommon, perhaps, for the chamber to inform their members of who good people are, good candidates, and bad ones. But when you start raising significant money for campaigns and you're putting those into those campaigns, it can be a little bit of a different game. Let me move a little bit from the state to the local chambers now. We had something very interesting happen about 3 weeks ago in Tulsa. Tulsa has a regional chamber of commerce, and the executive director of the regional Tulsa Chamber of Commerce actually sent out on chamber documentations, information or an invitation to attend a fundraiser at former Democrat Mayor Democrat Kathy Taylor's home on behalf of Democrat Senator Mary Landrieu from Louisiana. Now, what's interesting is this director thinking that because Mary Landrieu is from an energy-producing state and votes for energy bills, this would be something that people in Tulsa would care about, and so the invitation that goes out. Of course, the reality is, as long as Harry Reid remains the President pro tem of the Senate, he can bottle up any piece of legislation that's beneficial to the energy industry, and has pretty well done this. Well, the entire congressional delegation, all 5 U.S. representatives and both senators, lambasted this executive director for doing this, as well as all the conservative activists in Tulsa have called for his resignation. It's pretty risky when you get into partisan politics at state chamber using their own literature, their own letterhead on invitation or something to that nature. Another thing that has happened with some of our local chambers, in the past, most local chambers would raise their own money through dues, and then they would have perhaps golf tournaments, some type of fundraisers like that. But one of the things that's begun to happen recently in Oklahoma is cities have begun to turn over city tax dollars to the chamber to be used for however they choose to do that. One case happened in a town about 40 miles to the east of Oklahoma City, Shawnee. And lo and behold, what was happening is the city of Shawnee was turning all of its hotel motel tax dollars over to the chamber. The chamber went out and bought a $500,000 piece of land, put $250,000 down, and they have payments of $250,000. When they bought the land, they did not put it in the name of the city. They put it on their own name. When that was determined, and when that was found out what had happened, the city moved immediately to stop their contract and sending them that all that hotel motel tax because they felt it was a tremendous abuse. Well, the chamber sued the city, recognizing you certainly have the right to cancel this, but don't do it immediately. We have payments to make. We need that money to make the payments. So when they sued, they said, give us 6 months to come up with another arrangement. What I believe that other arrangement meant was give us 6 months to talk you into what a mistake you've made by pulling this money away from us, and they were successful in doing that. So they kissed and they made up, except for one city councilman wasn't going along with this. And after a couple or 3 months requesting documentation, he got everything he asked for from the city. The chamber wouldn't turn anything over. So next thing you know, they're back in court again. Then they kiss and they make up, and then they're back in court again. Well, who wins in this situation? The attorneys do. The city's not benefited. The chamber gets a black eye. They're besmirched. And then we've had other situations where another town called Tahlequah recently, their chamber, again, living on hotel motel tax, has been charged with, I believe, embezzlement for funds that are gone. When you're living off of your dues and fundraiser, you're very careful with your money. But when you're living off of someone else's money, taxpayer dollars, then you get real aggressive and such as that. Those are some of the bad things that occur, I believe. Now for the really ugly. This year, for the first time, the chamber has decided to move out of just being involved in political races for open seats, but they have decided to challenge some of the sitting incumbents, and we're talking the most conservative lawmakers in the state of Oklahoma. They've gone after these lawmakers. Mine was the first one that they began to search for a candidate to run against him. They contacted several potential candidates. They were turned down. My lawmaker had a total of $1,000 in the bank, believing that it's so difficult for grassroots candidates to raise money, and because he didn't have an opponent 2 years ago, he didn't try to raise any money so that money could go to other grassroots candidates. Well, it makes him look vulnerable with only $1,000 in the bank. So the chamber offered $40,000 to $60,000 to several different candidates to take my lawmaker out. They finally found someone to do it. Turned out to be a very poor candidate. They ended up not putting more than $5,000 in that, and that actually came from the Oklahoma City Chamber to do that. My lawmaker was able to raise $17,000, spent about half of that, and won that race 84 to 16%. Another lawmaker in Moore is also in the top 5 most conservative lawmakers in the state, consistently. They went to a candidate and offered $90,000 to $120,000 to take him out. The candidate turned him down. Another candidate bit. The chamber not only gave a lot of money to this fellow, they ran all kinds of independent ads and such as that. This candidate won with the incumbent, the conservative incumbent, won with 78% of the vote, 78 to 22. Another former lawmaker decided to step back into the state legislature and was disliked vehemently by the state chamber. It was an open seat. They went to the former chairman of the Republican Party for Oklahoma County, the largest county in the state, and offered him unlimited amount of money if he would run against Kevin Calvey. happened to be a friend of Kevin's. He left and immediately had a meeting with Kevin and related to him what had occurred. So what we're having in Oklahoma, I believe, is an attempt for total control by the State Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that these more recent efforts in trying to take out the most conservative lawmakers, what we are seeing here is even if they can't take them out, they're shooting a shot across the bow of all the other lawmakers. If you don't do what we want you to do, if you're not willing to walk according to the things that we want, then we'll come after you. And in a lot of cases, that's very intimidating to state lawmakers. They would prefer, if they can avoid a race, they would prefer to avoid one. And knowing that they will have a primary to run against, a primary opponent, is very strong incentive for them to do the right thing in the eyes of the chamber. Again, the state chamber has done some very good things. I'm not, I probably agree with 70% of their agenda. Here is the main problem with the state chamber in the state of Oklahoma. They really don't believe in free market capitalism. They believe very much in being able to make sure certain corporations, certain of their friends, in my estimation, get the favored opportunity, the favored location, the government kickbacks or the upfront subsidies or something to that nature. And it's one reason they fight tax cuts so much. As a matter of fact, in Broken Arrow, when the state director and the lobbyist was up there speaking to the group, they indicated that we've got to convince our lawmakers not to cut taxes. Give you an example of why they may not want to cut taxes. Had this article about Bank of Oklahoma out of the Oklahoman a couple of years ago. That's the largest bank in Oklahoma, and it's owned, or primary principal of that bank is the second wealthiest person in the state. One of the things that occurred is they bought a company out called Cottonwood Venture Capital in 2007. We have a program in the state that we will do a 20% kickback for venture capital that's invested. Well, in 2008, this particular program was being dissolved by our state legislature. So on their tax return, they reported $40 million in venture capital investments, meaning the state of Oklahoma, the taxpayers, would kick back $8 million to these people. In 2010, they amended their tax return, basically saying, oops, when we said we had $40 million investment, we forgot we had another $800 million investment. If that goes through, and I've never seen a follow-up on this, this was being investigated by the Oklahoma Tax Commission, but if that goes through, that means the taxpayers have to kick back $160 million for that $800 million investment that they forgot. You see, when you really don't believe in removing taxes from businesses and reducing regulation, which is the free market way to stimulate the economy, when what you believe is subsidizing up front, behind, in the middle, or whatever, and granting these favored opportunities and locations, you have to have a high tax base because you've got to redistribute a lot of money to your buddies and to your friends. Crony capitalism. In Oklahoma, it's $500.5 billion a year and various types of kickbacks out of a budget of $7 million. It's huge. If we were to eliminate that, we could reduce business taxes. In fact, we could totally eliminate corporate income taxes. So again, to reiterate, the chambers aren't all bad, but there are things that you need to watch for. Be careful in your local chambers. If they are receiving tax dollars, that becomes, I think, a hotbed for potential corruption there. And just understand your state chambers may have an agenda besides really good government, in my estimation. So those are the things that I think you need to look at. Please obtain a copy of this article about the U.S. Chamber. It is so good. Thank you very much for your time here.